The twin suns of Ardalis Prime hung low in the violet sky, casting long shadows across the dense forest. Captain Elias Vance walked carefully, each step crushing the bioluminescent moss beneath his boots. The air was thick with the scent of unknown flowers, and strange insects buzzed around, their wings reflecting the sunlight like tiny mirrors. Elias had been sent here to map uncharted territories, but as he moved deeper into the forest, he felt something more than just curiosity stirring inside him, a sense of anticipation, almost like the planet itself was waiting. He paused and adjusted his backpack, feeling the weight of his equipment. Scanners beeped softly, detecting nothing out of the ordinary. Yet Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He turned slowly, expecting perhaps to see a native animal, but the forest seemed still. Only the rustling of leaves broke the silence. He tightened his grip on the plasma tool at his side, more out of habit than fear. Humans had survived in hostile worlds before. He reminded himself, this was just another challenge. As he moved forward, a faint glow caught his eye. It shimmered through the trees like light bouncing off water. Curious, he approached cautiously. The glow grew brighter, revealing a small clearing, and in the center of it knelt a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. She looked human, at least at first glance, but there was something ethereal about her. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and shimmered with an inner light. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, moving even though there was no wind. Her eyes were large and reflective, catching the twin suns in a way that made them look like pools of liquid glass. She held a small crystalline vessel in her hands, and when she noticed Elias, she did not flee. Who are you?" Elias asked, keeping his voice steady. She looked up slowly, and he felt a strange pull in his chest, as if her gaze reached inside him. I am Lyra," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but it carried an urgency that made Elias tense. "You are mine." Before he could respond, she lifted the vessel toward him. "Your blood," she said. "I need it." Elias froze. In all his training, he had never encountered anything like this. His mind raced. Was she dangerous? Was this some alien parasite or a trap set by a rival colony? Yet in her eyes he saw no malice, only desperation. Against his instincts, he held out his arm. She took it gently, placing the vessel against his skin. A warmth spread from the point of contact, but it was not painful. Elias watched, mesmerized, as a faint glow of his blood entered the crystal container. The process was swift, almost ritualistic, yet Elias could feel nothing harmful. And then, as suddenly as she had taken it, Lyra collapsed to her knees. Her hands fell to the ground and her head bowed. "You are my end," she whispered, her voice trembling. Elias's heart raced. His instincts screamed that something monumental had just occurred, though he could not yet understand it. The forest around them seemed to shift subtly, the leaves swaying though no wind blew. The air felt charged, almost alive. "Wait, what do you mean?" Elias asked, taking a cautious step forward. She did not answer. She simply stayed on her knees, her body shaking slightly. He knelt beside her, unsure if he should help or remain distant. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes, now glistening with unspoken emotion, met his. "I have waited," she said softly, "for someone like you."
Someone who can...
"Change everything." Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. He did not understand her words, yet a part of him sensed their weight. He had been chosen in some way he could not comprehend, and that choice had consequences he could not yet foresee. What will happen to me?" he asked cautiously, his hand hovering over the small device strapped to his belt that could defend him if needed. Lyra shook her head slowly. "It is not about what will happen to you. It is about what you carry. Something in your blood, something in your being. It is rare. It can awaken me. It can end me, or it can save me. I do not know which it will be." Elias's mind spun. Humans were adaptable, resilient survivors. He had faced storms, alien wildlife, and hostile environments, but nothing like this. A being that seemed to respond to his very existence. His heart thumped with a mixture of fear and fascination. For a long moment, neither spoke. The forest was alive with quiet noises. The rustle of unseen creatures, the hum of the glowing moss underfoot, and the distant roar of wind over the rocky cliffs surrounding the forest. The moment felt suspended, as if time itself had slowed to observe them. Finally, Elias spoke again. "Why me? Why not someone else?" Lyra's lips trembled. and she looked away briefly as if ashamed or uncertain. I do not choose. I do not understand it myself. Only that you are different. Your species, your spirit, it is unlike anything I have seen. Humans, you are unpredictable, dangerous, brilliant, and perhaps that is why I fell. Elias did not fully understand, but something in her words resonated with him. Humans had always been underestimated by other species, thought to be weak or reckless, yet they survived, thrived, and adapted in ways others could not imagine. Perhaps Lyra saw this. Perhaps she saw hope. He extended a hand to her, and after a moment of hesitation, she took it. Her touch was cool, almost electric, sending a strange warmth through him. Can you stand? He asked gently. She nodded, and together they rose. For the first time, Elias felt that their meeting was no accident. There was a purpose here, hidden but undeniable. Whatever it was, it would change both of them, and perhaps the entire colony. As they moved out of the clearing, Elias noticed strange markings etched into the trees. They glowed faintly, like veins of light running under the bark. What are these? He asked. Lyra's gaze lingered on them. Memories, echoes, of those who came before, my people. They leave traces, fragments of their being in the places they touch. And now you are part of it. Elias swallowed hard. He had explored many worlds, but never had he felt so small and so significant at the same time. The forest seemed to close around them, yet it was not threatening. It was protective, almost reverent. Hours passed as they walked together in silence, Lyra occasionally pointing out unusual plants or phenomena that defied human science. Elias's curiosity grew, tempered by caution. He sensed that her presence was tied to forces he could not begin to understand. Night fell and the twin moons rose, casting silver light through the canopy. Elias led Lyra to a small abandoned human outpost. He made a fire and they sat by it, neither fully speaking, yet both aware that words were not necessary to convey the importance of what had just occurred. Finally, Lyra spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. The others will come. They will not understand. They may challenge you, test you, even harm you, but you carry something they do not. And perhaps that is why they will fear you. Elias stared into the fire, thinking of the humans back at the main settlement. He thought of the resilience of his species, of the ways humans had survived against impossible odds, of the ingenuity that had taken them from one planet to another. If Lyra's words were true, then his species' greatest strength was not just survival. It was their unpredictability, their ability to rise when others thought they would fall. He looked at Lyra. She was fragile, yet there was strength in her eyes, a knowledge that stretched back thousands of years. And somehow he knew their fates were now intertwined. Whatever lay ahead, it would not just test him. It would test humanity itself. And as the twin moons reflected off Lyra's silver hair, Elias felt a mixture of fear and determination. The encounter had only just begun, but already it had the weight of destiny. Somewhere deep in the forest, unseen eyes watched, and somewhere far beyond the stars, forces both ancient and unknowable stirred. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and prepared for whatever was coming next. The night in the forest was alive with sounds Elias had never heard before. Strange insects hummed, their light flashing rhythmically like distant stars, and the trees seemed to sway even without wind. Lyra sat beside the small fire, her eyes reflecting the flames, lost in thought. Elias watched her carefully. There was a sadness in her gaze, a weight he could not yet understand, and yet there was also a glimmer of hope. He wanted to speak, to ask her about the blood, about why she had whispered those words, but he hesitated. Some part of him felt that answers would come in time. Instead, he leaned back, letting the warmth of the fire seep into his tired muscles. They had walked for hours after the initial encounter, deeper into the forest, avoiding paths that could be dangerous. Elias had spent his life exploring worlds, but this was different. This was not just a planet to map or study. This was a world that seemed alive in ways he could feel, and Lyra was at its center. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. You may not understand now, but the blood you carry, it is unique. Humans, you have a strength my people rarely see. Not just physical, but something deeper, something that can awaken me. Elias frowned. Awaken you? What does that mean? Lyra shook her head. I cannot explain fully. It is beyond words. My people, the Elari, have existed for millennia. We are caretakers in a sense. We maintain balance across worlds. But we are not complete. Your blood, your existence, can change that. It can save me or it can end me. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The words were heavy, almost impossible to grasp, yet he could sense their truth. He had faced hostile planets, alien predators, and deadly storms, but this was unlike anything he had imagined. The stakes were no longer just survival. They were tied to the fate of another being, one who seemed as fragile as she was powerful. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not someone else?" Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining with a strange light. "I do not choose. I do not understand it myself. Only that you are different. Humans are unpredictable, brilliant, dangerous, and perhaps that is why I fell to you first," Elias swallowed. Humans had always been underestimated by other species. They were considered weak, fragile, or reckless. Yet humans had survived on countless planets, adapted to impossible conditions, and thrived against odds that should have been insurmountable. Perhaps Lyra saw this. Perhaps she saw what other species did not, the spark of potential, the unpredictable strength of humanity. The fire crackled, and the forest seemed to lean in closer, as if listening. Elias realized that whatever had begun with the taking of his blood was far from over. There was a connection now, one that tied him to Lyra in ways he could not yet comprehend, and with that connection came responsibility, a responsibility he had not asked for but could not ignore. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Elias noticed subtle changes in himself. His senses seemed sharper. He could hear the faintest movements in the forest, see in the dim light as though it were day. Even his strength seemed enhanced, though he did not understand why. Dreams haunted him at night, visions of distant stars, alien cities, and events he had never lived through. And always there was Lyra, appearing in glimpses, guiding him, warning him, though never fully explaining. The colonists began to notice changes as well. Tools he handled seemed to respond to his touch with greater precision. He could fix broken machinery faster, anticipate dangers before they appeared. Some marveled at his abilities. Others whispered that something strange was happening. Elias did not fully understand it himself, but he felt the truth of it deep in his bones. The blood Lyra had taken was not ordinary. It had changed something within him, awakening abilities he had never known. Lyra returned one evening, moving silently through the forest like a shadow. She did not speak at first, merely observing Elias as he prepared supplies for an expedition. When he noticed her, he nodded, gesturing for her to come closer. "You have changed," she said softly. "The blood, it connects us more than I expected. I can feel your strength, your mind, your spirit. It is rare." Elias studied her carefully. "What happens now? The others? Your people? Will they come?" Lyra's expression darkened. "They will? They will not understand. Humans are unpredictable, and that frightens them. They see order, control, balance, and you disrupt that. You are dangerous to them just by existing." Elias felt the weight of her words. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was not a predator or a storm. This was a civilization older than his own, with powers and knowledge that dwarfed humanity. And yet he also felt a flicker of something else, hope. Humans had survived against all odds, not through brute force alone, but through creativity, courage, and the ability to adapt. Perhaps that was exactly what Lyra's people could not anticipate. Together they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Elias taught her about human ways, strategy, improvisation, and the unpredictable thinking that allowed humans to thrive. Lyra, in turn, shared what she could of her people's history, their rituals, and the balance they maintained across worlds. Each night, as the twin moons of Artemis Prime rose, they spoke of things neither fully understood, building a fragile trust that bridged the vast gap between their species. Then, one morning, the forest itself seemed to change. The air was heavy, charged with an energy that made Elias's skin tingle. Shadows moved among the trees, but when he looked, he saw nothing. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They are here," she whispered. Elias's heart pounded. The Aelari were arriving. Unlike Lyra, these others were not curious, not cautious. They were here to judge, to test, perhaps to claim. And Elias knew that his humanity, the very essence that made him unpredictable, was the key. His mind raced, thinking of ways to protect not just himself but Lyra, and perhaps the entire colony. The first of the Aelari appeared at the edge of the clearing, Their forms shimmered in the sunlight, taller and more imposing than Lyra, their presence radiating authority and power. They did not speak, yet Elias could feel their intentions, cold and measured, analyzing him, judging him. "You are human," one of them said finally, its voice like a chorus of wind through metal, "and yet, different. Your blood carries potential we did not expect. You disturb balance." Elias swallowed, steadying himself. "I don't want to disturb anything," he said calmly. "But I won't let anyone harm this planet or the people here. And I won't let anyone harm her." He gestured toward Lyra, who stood close, watching silently. The Elari regarded him in silence. Then one stepped forward, extending a hand toward Lyra. "She belongs to us," it said. "Her life, her power. It is our responsibility. You cannot interfere." Elias did not flinch. "She is not yours to control. She has a choice and she chooses to be here." Lyra stepped forward, standing beside him. "I am not your tool," she said firmly. "I choose this path. I choose him." A tense silence followed. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the twin suns casting long shadows over the confrontation. Elias realized that the Aelari had underestimated humans' resolve. They had not faced a species that could act unpredictably, that could stand firm not just through strength, but through spirit. Elias and Lyra worked together, combining human ingenuity with Aelari knowledge. They created defenses, improvised strategies, and used the environment to their advantage. The forest, alive and observant, seemed to respond to their unity, shifting in ways that gave them cover and protection. By nightfall, the first confrontation ended not with violence, but with a stalemate. The Aelari retreated, their intentions unclear but wary. Elias realized that this was only the beginning. His blood, his humanity, and his bond with Lyra had set events in motion that could change the fate of their world, and perhaps many worlds beyond. As the fire crackled that night, Elias looked at Lyra. "This is bigger than me," he said quietly. She nodded. "It is bigger than both of us. But together we can face it. You carry something rare, something powerful, something human." Elias understood then what she meant. Humans had always been underestimated, and yet they survived, thrived, and adapted in ways others could not predict. That unpredictability was their strength. And now it was not just their survival at stake. It was the survival of a fragile being who had placed her trust in them, and a connection that could change the course of worlds. He looked at the twin moons rising over the horizon, and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, he would not falter. Humanity had always faced the impossible, and now, in this alien forest with a being like Lyra at his side, they would face it again. The following days were tense. The forest of Ardalis Prime seemed different now, charged with an energy Elias had never felt before. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound of wildlife felt like a signal, warning or invitation he could not tell. Lyra moved beside him constantly, silent and alert. There was a sense of purpose in her movements, a discipline that belied her delicate appearance. She had begun teaching Elias more about her people, the Aelari, their rituals, their technology, and their role as caretakers of worlds. "Your people are strong," she said one morning, as they climbed a rocky ridge overlooking the dense forest. "Stronger than mine often anticipate. You survive because you adapt, because you think differently. That is why your blood, your existence, is so rare." Elias wiped sweat from his brow. It seemed strange to hear that from someone who has lived for centuries, watching entire civilizations rise and fall. Lyra smiled faintly. "Strength is not only in survival. It is in understanding and choices. Your people. You have something that many of my kind lack. Creativity, courage, and unpredictability. And now we face a test." Her words were chilling. He knew she referred to the other Aelari who had come to investigate him and his blood. Unlike Lyra, they did not hesitate. They viewed humans as unstable, a species that might tip the balance of life across worlds if left unchecked. And Elias realized that standing against them would not be easy. It began with small encounters, shadows among the trees, strange lights moving silently in the distance, and sudden disturbances in the forest. Each time Elias and Lyra would respond quickly, testing defenses and improvising strategies. The more they worked together, the more Elias understood how unpredictable humans could be, and how valuable that unpredictability was. His mind raced with ideas that no Aelari could foresee. One evening, while preparing supplies near a riverbank, they were suddenly surrounded. The other Aelari had arrived in force. Their forms shimmered with power, taller and more imposing than Lyra, radiating an authority that made Elias instinctively step back. Yet he did not falter. He looked at Lyra and she nodded slightly, a silent agreement that they would face this together. "You have interfered," one of the Aelari said, its voice deep and resonant. "Humans are not to meddle. You carry a power that disrupts balance. You are dangerous." Elias stepped forward, holding his ground. "I am not here to disrupt, but I will not let you harm this world or her. Lyra is not yours to control." Lyra moved beside him. "I am not your tool," she said firmly. "I choose this path. I choose him." The Aelari regarded them in silence. Then another stepped forward, raising a hand. The ground trembled slightly, as if the forest itself acknowledged their presence. Elias knew they had powers beyond human understanding, but he also knew that humans had survived by turning disadvantages into opportunities. He took a deep breath and acted. Using the dense trees and uneven terrain to their advantage, he began maneuvering, leading the Aelari into areas where their size and control were less effective. Lyra followed, weaving in her own knowledge of the forest and her people's abilities. Together, they created traps from fallen branches, hidden pits and natural formations, using the environment like an ally. The first clash was not of brute force, but of strategy. Elias distracted them, moving unpredictably, drawing attention while Lyra used subtle energy pulses to confuse and mislead. The Aelari underestimated humans' ingenuity, expecting straightforward reactions. Yet every move Elias made was a deliberate choice, exploiting gaps in their understanding. Hours passed, the forest echoing with strange sounds, but by nightfall, a temporary stalemate had been reached. The Aelari retreated, slightly cautious, and Elias realized they were learning, adapting to his unpredictability. Humans were not merely physical beings. They were thinkers, inventors, problem solvers. That was their strength. Later, as they rested near the glowing moss that carpeted the forest floor, Elias spoke quietly. "They will come again, and next time, it will not just be tests or warnings. They will try to take her or me or both. We need a plan." Lyra nodded. "I have some knowledge of their rituals and strategies, but your human thinking, it is unexpected. Together we can use it. You have something my kind rarely has, adaptability and courage. That combination is rare." Elias looked at her, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Humans had always faced impossible odds, but never on this scale. Never against beings who could see through time, who understood energy and life in ways no human could. Yet he felt something within himself, a resolve that had been growing since the day she took his blood. This was not just survival. This was a battle of wit, spirit, and determination. The next day, they began preparations for the inevitable. Elias taught Lyra about human tactics, improvisation, and unpredictability, while she shared as much of her knowledge as she could without breaking her people's rules. They experimented, tested each other's ideas, and created contingencies for every possible move. The forest, alive and observant, seemed to respond. Strange plants shifted subtly, revealing hidden paths or obscuring their movements. The environment became a silent ally, a reflection of their growing bond. When the Aelari returned, it was in greater numbers. They moved with a coordinated precision that spoke of centuries of training and discipline. Yet Elias was ready. Using every skill he had learned, every instinct honed from years of exploration, he led them into traps, feints, and diversions. Lyra amplified his strategies with subtle energy manipulations, confusing and disorienting the Aelari. The battle unfolded like a dance. Elias darted through the forest, unpredictable and fast, drawing attention while Lyra guided energy currents to create illusions and block paths. The Aelari, powerful and experienced, found themselves challenged in ways they had not anticipated. Humans were not merely physical opponents, they were thinkers, problem solvers, and in Elias's case, a force of nature in combination with Lyra's ancient knowledge. Hours passed. The twin moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light on the forest. Elias and Lyra were exhausted but unbroken. The Aelari retreated once more, their expressions wary. They had underestimated humans' creativity, courage, and adaptability. And in that moment, Elias realized something profound. Humans were not just survivors, They were unpredictable forces of change, capable of standing against civilizations older and wiser than themselves. As the forest quieted, Elias and Lyra sat by a small fire. Sweat dripped from their brows and their muscles ached, yet there was a sense of triumph. Not victory in the traditional sense, but proof that together, human and Elari, they could face the impossible. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting both relief and admiration. "You have done what few could. You are remarkable." Elias shook his head. "I didn't do it alone. We work together, and humans survive because we adapt. That's our strength," she smiled faintly. "Yes, but you have also shown something more: courage, willingness to face the unknown. That is rare." For the first time, Elias allowed himself to hope. The threat of the Elari was not gone, but he now understood that humanity's strength was not in raw power alone, but in ingenuity, unpredictability, and the spirit that refused to be controlled. The forest settled into silence, the glowing moss and distant calls of wildlife marking the passing of night. Elias knew the challenges ahead would be greater. The other Elari would not relent, and perhaps they would escalate their attempts. But now he was not merely a man facing alien forces, he was a human, representing the best qualities of his species, standing side by side with a being who had once knelt before him in desperation. He looked at Lyra. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we face it together, and we will find a way." She nodded, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "Together," she agreed. And as the first light of dawn touched the forest canopy, Elias felt a surge of determination. Humans had always survived against impossible odds. They had adapted, innovated, and persevered. And now, on Ardalis Prime, facing an ancient and powerful species, that same resilience would be tested and proven once more. In the quiet of the morning, Elias made a silent promise. He would protect Lyra, the colony, and the fragile balance they had begun to forge. Humans had always been underestimated. Now, they would show that their greatest power lay not in strength alone, but in spirit, courage, and the ability to rise against the impossible. The days that followed were tense yet filled with purpose. Elias and Lyra moved through the forest with a quiet confidence born of shared experience. Each step, each decision was measured as though the planet itself were guiding them. The colony had begun to take notice of the unusual occurrences, though none fully understood the events unfolding. Strange energy patterns, subtle changes in the environment, and Elias's seemingly enhanced abilities all pointed to something extraordinary. Elias knew the other Elari would return. Their previous encounters had made it clear they would not allow humans to interfere, nor would they ignore the blood that now tied him to Lyra. Yet he felt no fear. Humans had survived impossible worlds, adapted to dangers that could have destroyed them, and found solutions in moments where others would falter. Now he understood that this resilience was not only for survival, it was a force that could shape the future of entire species. Lyra walked beside him, her movements graceful, her eyes alert. "They will come in greater numbers," she said quietly, "and they will bring forces that will test us beyond anything we have faced before. But you carry something they cannot predict. That is why we have hope." Elias nodded. "Then we use that. We make them see that humans are not so easily controlled. We survive because we think differently, because we adapt." Their plan was simple but daring. They would draw the Elari into the heart of the forest, where the dense trees, glowing moss, and natural formations could be used as advantages. Elias had mapped every inch of the area, noting pitfalls, hidden paths, and unusual plants that could be used strategically. Lyra, in turn, manipulated subtle energy currents, creating illusions and barriers to confuse and slow their adversaries. When the Elari arrived, the forest seemed to react immediately. Leaves rustled unnaturally, shadows shifted, and the air carried a faint hum of energy. Elias and Lyra were ready. The first of the Elari appeared at the edge of the clearing, their forms shimmering, radiating authority and power. They had brought others this time, more of their kind, stronger, more disciplined, and less hesitant than before. "You persist," one of them said, its voice echoing through the trees. "You have disrupted balance. You carry a power that is uncontrolled." Elias stepped forward, standing tall. "I do not wish to disrupt balance, but I will not let you harm this planet, this forest, or her. Lyra has chosen her path. She is not yours to command. Lyra moved beside him, her eyes steady. "We face this together," she said. The Alari studied them for a moment, then advanced. Elias's heart raced, but he focused on the forest, his surroundings and the opportunities they provided. Using natural cover, hidden paths, and improvised traps, he led them through a series of maneuvers that frustrated the Alari. Each step was calculated, every movement unpredictable. The humans' ability to adapt, to think creatively in the moment, was something the Alari had not encountered before. Lyra enhanced their strategy with her abilities, creating illusions, manipulating energy flows, and subtly shifting the environment to their advantage. The combination of human ingenuity and Alari knowledge proved formidable. The forest itself seemed to bend to their plan, hiding them, revealing paths, and creating distractions that slowed their pursuers. Hours passed. The Alari, though powerful and experienced, were challenged at every turn. They could anticipate patterns, control energy, and sense disturbances, but they could not predict the ingenuity of a human mind. Elias exploited gaps, feints, and diversions with precision, always moving, always adapting. Finally, they reached a large clearing near the river's edge. The water shimmered in the twin moon's light, reflecting the trees and the sky above. Elias turned to Lyra. "This is it. We make our stand here. We use everything we have learned. We adapt, we fight, and we survive." Lyra nodded, her silver hair catching the moonlight. "And we show them that humans are more than they expect. That courage, spirit, and choice cannot be predicted or controlled." The Alari entered the clearing, moving in synchronized formations. Their eyes glowed faintly, scanning for weaknesses. Elias and Lyra moved as one, using strategy, speed, and unpredictability to their advantage. They dodged attacks, redirected energy flows, and used the environment to shield themselves. The battle was not one of brute force alone. It was a contest of wits, spirit, and timing. Elias realized that this confrontation was more than survival. It was a demonstration. Humans had always faced impossible odds using creativity, courage, and adaptability to overcome challenges. Now he was proving that these qualities were not merely traits, they were strengths that could stand against a civilization far older and more experienced than his own. Lyra's energy pulses created illusions that confused and misdirected the Alari, while Elias used hidden paths and natural cover to outmaneuver them. They forced the Alari to split, to reconsider their strategy, and ultimately to question their assumptions. Humans were not predictable. Humans were not tools to be controlled. Humans were forces of change, capable of standing against the unimaginable. Hours turned into night, and the battle reached its climax. Elias and Lyra worked seamlessly, moving, countering, and adapting. The forest, alive and responsive, aided them, hiding movements and amplifying their efforts. Finally, the Alari halted, their formations breaking, their expressions wary. They had encountered a force they could not fully comprehend. Human spirit combined with Lyra's knowledge and the forest's natural defenses. The clearing fell silent. Elias and Lyra, exhausted but resolute, faced the remaining Alari. There was no malice in their eyes now, only recognition. Recognition that humans were not merely survivors. They were unpredictable, ingenious, and capable of shaping outcomes in ways the Alari could not anticipate. Lyra stepped forward, addressing the Alari. "Humans are not tools. They are not to be controlled. They carry a spirit, a courage, and a choice that you cannot predict or command. We have shown that together, we can face even the impossible." One of the Alari, older and more imposing, spoke finally. "You have demonstrated something rare. Your existence, human, and your choices, Lyra, have proven that balance is not merely about control. It is about understanding, cooperation, and respect. Perhaps humanity carries a power we did not fully appreciate." Elias, breathing heavily, realized the truth in those words. Humans had always been underestimated. Their greatest strength was not in raw power, technology, or longevity, but in their creativity, courage, and ability to adapt to the unpredictable. That same strength had allowed them to survive in countless worlds, face the unimaginable, and now stand alongside an ancient and powerful species as equals. Lyra turned to Elias, her eyes reflecting relief and gratitude. "You have done what few could. You have proven. Humans are remarkable." Elias shook his head. "It is not me alone. Humans survive because we adapt, because we think differently. That is our strength, and together we can face anything." The Alari, recognizing the bond between them, retreated from the clearing. There was no victory in the traditional sense, but a new understanding had been forged. Humans were not to be controlled or dismissed. They were unpredictable, ingenious, and courageous, forces of change that could not be ignored. As dawn broke over the forest, Elias and Lyra stood side by side. The twin suns rose, casting warm light on the glowing moss and the trees that had witnessed the struggle. There was a sense of calm, of resolution, and yet an awareness that challenges would come again. Elias looked at Lyra. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "we face it together. Humans have always survived impossible odds. We will continue to do so." Lyra smiled, her silver hair shimmering in the morning light. "Yes, together, and perhaps humanity will teach my people something we have long forgotten. Courage, adaptability, the power of choice." Elias nodded, feeling a profound sense of purpose. Humans had always been underestimated. They had survived storms, hostile worlds, and impossible challenges. Now, standing in an alien forest beside a being as ancient and powerful as Lyra, he realized that humanity's greatest strength had always been within them. Their spirit, their courage, and their ability to rise when others faltered. The forest seemed to breathe around them, alive with energy, as if acknowledging the new balance that had been forged. Elias and Lyra had faced the impossible and emerged stronger, not through domination or power alone, but through ingenuity, courage, and the unpredictable force of humanity. And as they looked toward the horizon where the forest met the rising twin suns, Elias felt certain of one thing: humans had survived before and they would survive again. Not because they were strongest, but because they never gave up, because they adapted, and because they carried a spirit that could change worlds. In that moment, Elias understood the full meaning of Lyra's words when she first knelt before him. "You are my end." It was not a warning. It was recognition. The end of fear, the end of doubt, and the beginning of a future where humans and Alari could stand together, not as master and tool, but as allies united by trust, courage, and the unpredictable power of choice. And with that understanding, the forest seemed to sigh, a quiet promise of hope and resilience echoing through its ancient trees. Elias had survived, Lyra had survived, and humanity, true to its nature, had once again proven that it could rise to meet the impossible.